The state media is continuing their anti-impeachment propaganda. We have a fun clip here from PBS. They get government money and they're sitting around, all very sophisticated, communicating amongst themselves that there is no evidence about Joe Biden's involvement, even though there's tons of evidence about his actual crimes and then the cover-up of the crimes, which you could layer in multiple different impeachments if you wanted to. But here is the propaganda. Before we get to Kevin McCarthy explaining what his goals are in this impeachment, we got to check in and see what the media has to say about all of this. This one was from Bill D'Agostino. He says, "These are your tax dollars at work last Friday night on PBS." Clipped all of these out within 90 minutes. Okay, so shout out to Bill for clipping all of this and assembling it. Within 90 minutes on PBS, propaganda team extraordinaire.
Under pressure from the far right, Speaker Kevin McCarthy launched a formal impeachment inquiry based on no evidence into President Joe Biden.
And Republicans, Jonathan, have failed to produce any evidence.
There's no direct connection yet.
We don't have any evidence of that at all.
Well, they hadn't come across any new evidence.
There is absolutely no evidence.
There's no evidence here.
There is no evidence.
Whether they know there's evidence or not.
The president never discussed business with his son.
Nothing has come out of there.
There's nothing here.
Devin Archer said no, President Biden was never involved.
Is there any evidence that President Biden took a bribe or that President Biden used his influence to benefit his son Hunter at all?
Yes.
There isn't.
Yes,
no
there
evidence.
is.
So we've established that there's no evidence right now.
Oh, gosh. That's what these people do, and they just sit around talking amongst themselves. No evidence, no evidence. We could do the same thing, okay? We can just sit here and say, yes, there is. Yes, there is evidence. We're going to sound like 5-year-olds at one point. There's no evidence. Yes, there is. No, there isn't. Yes, there is. Oh, gosh. We have some documents to show. We've got timelines. We've got an entire book right here, an entire book of it. What do you guys have? Nothing. So they just sit there and they just keep talking amongst themselves. Now, they're not alone. You've got people like this guy, Schiff, who says this is all just a waste of time and we should just move on from the whole thing.
I want to ask you to contrast Mitch McConnell's declaration that, quote, they nailed him, the impeachment managers of Donald Trump, with Republican House members' confession that there's zero evidence linking President Joe Biden to anything worthy of an impeachment. What do you make of the sham? We try not to call it an impeachment inquiry, but a speakership clinging to by Kevin McCarthy going on in the House.
She's having a rough night, huh?
I mean, it is such a contrast from the methodical way we went about gathering the evidence in the first impeachment and the seriousness with which we took responsibility of finding high crimes and misdemeanors to what we see today, which is essentially an evidence-free impeachment proceeding of some kind. And for what? Because Kevin McCarthy needs something to throw the right-wing base in order to get them not to shut down the government? Is that now what the standard is going to be for impeachment in the future? That if you're a very weak speaker and a single vote can call a vote to remove you, that you can begin some kind of impeachment
inquiry like Nancy did
in order to keep the government open? Is that really where we've...
Nancy Pelosi literally started the impeachment inquiry process. She did that, and then they came back for a full vote. That's exactly what Kev is doing.
And sadly, the answer is yes. Look, a few weeks ago, he threw them some red meat and said, well, you know, I'll censure Adam Schiff if you'll keep me speaker a little longer. And now it's...
I forgot to mention that. Thank you for reminding us about that, Adam. Just as a reminder, Adam Schiff has been censured. And now, previously, I was wrong about this. It's more like 20 people or so have been censured in all of American history, which is still a very small number. But in recent modern American history, I mean, this guy has been censured, and only a very small select few people have been censured in America, which is a really horrific thing. We expect more out of our Congress people. And for Adam Schiff to go down in American history as somebody who has that asterisk for being censured, it's almost like we should just not listen to anything he says.
So I'll move forward with an impeachment of Joe Biden if you keep me as speaker a little longer. You know, every time he does the sops to the right wing and the MAGA crowd in his conference, it just brings the whole institution lower. And
that's not possible. You guys cannot be taken lower. Nobody has any trust or faith in you guys. So that is Schiff, censured. What a loser. And also this guy who's no longer in Congress. So now I think he's auditioning to get a media job somewhere, which they'll probably not give him because he's not that good of a communicator. Adam Kinzinger.
This is not what people are. So much time talking about Hunter Biden this year, and they could have been talking about spending.
Right.
Things like I cared about were things like spending levels, not this witch hunt because we have to somehow equate
And let's
Biden
turn to that because Republican Congressman Ken Buck, who wants to hold the line on spending, he has an op-ed in the Post saying, "My fellow Republicans, one disgraceful impeachment doesn't deserve another," writing about Trump's first impeachment. "I joined my Republican colleagues then in 2019 in denouncing that impeachment was, as we argued at the time, an inversion of our own rule of law system. The Democrats had their man and found a pretext to impeach him. Trump's impeachment in 2019 was a disgrace to the Constitution, a disservice to Americans. The GOP's reprise in 2023 is no better." By the way, just as an aside, you voted against that 2019 impeachment, and you later said you regret voting against it.
I do, but look, Ken Buck's consistent. I'll give him that. It's been very good that he's been speaking out. I disagree with that somehow 2019 and the 2021, I guess, impeachment is somehow similar to this. It's not. That was a very, very serious issue.
Yeah.
And this may be a serious issue if you can show evidence. The Hunter Biden thing, they've shown no evidence. And so they're going on an impeachment inquiry to hopefully find evidence that they can impeach on, which is a very different way to...
All right, Adam Schiff got censured. This guy no longer in Congress. Well, they are out there just doing the talking point game, spreading their propaganda because they know there is a ton of evidence. They just don't want to look at it. Here is what Kevin McCarthy said. So he posted this over at the Speaker of the House website. He's given us some guidance on what exactly is an impeachment inquiry. He posted this September. He says, "Last week, Kev announced an impeachment inquiry into Biden." And so what exactly is an impeachment inquiry? Kev says, simply put, the impeachment inquiry is an investigation into whether Biden has engaged in impeachable offenses under the Constitution. Prior to the announcement, our committees were already investigating oversight and potential misconduct related to their duties. That work will continue, but will now also include a focused inquiry into whether President Biden has committed impeachable offenses. By opening a formal impeachment inquiry, McCarthy has further empowered House committees to continue their job of providing answers to the American people. Now that an inquiry is underway, this investigation can rely on the broadest scope of congressional power. With this enhanced authority, it will be more difficult for the Biden administration to stonewall efforts and find the truth. If the committee, during this impeachment inquiry, uncover evidence of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, then and only then will next steps towards impeachment proceedings be considered. Those next steps, if warranted, are the drafting and the consideration of the articles of impeachment at the committee level, and then consideration by the full House. The American people deserve to know the truth and to know their public offices are not for sale. And if Biden has nothing to hide, he should want that as well. House Republicans are keeping our commitment, will hold the government officials accountable. That's what this inquiry allows the House to do. So first step, and I think that he's explaining that well, and he's following the Nancy Pelosi precedent, so sounds good to me. This is Nancy Mace responding, saying there's plenty of evidence. These other lefty and Kinzingers can't see it. That's their fault.
Let me also ask you, before you go, the impeachment inquiry that McCarthy announced, even though he had said he wouldn't do it without a vote, and then a few days later he does it without a vote. I want to read you something that Ken Buck, one of your Republican colleagues, had to say in a Washington Post op-ed of the impeachment inquiry. He said, "Impeachment is a serious matter and should have a foundation of rock-solid facts. Trump's impeachment in 2019 was a disgrace to the Constitution and is a disservice to Americans. The GOP's reprise in 2023 is no better." He says these allegations against the Biden family are part of an imagined history and a fictitious version of events. Was this premature, going all the way with an impeachment inquiry?
I don't believe so. The facts are everywhere. There are text messages, there are emails, there are witnesses, there are whistleblowers, there are meetings, there are phone calls, there are dinners, and you can't say, hey, there's a little bit of smoke, we're not going to follow the fire. And the inquiry, my understanding is, as you said earlier, gives us expanded subpoena powers. I want the bank records of Joe Biden. All of that should be on the table to prove out the allegations in the SARS reports. We're talking about a significant sum of money. We are talking about bribery. And in the Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, that is the basis for impeachment.
There's no evidence of bribery.
There are witnesses, the 1023 form, there are, you know.
And you've been investigating. I mean, you're on the oversight.
There is evidence. We can't say that there's no evidence when there is evidence. And quite frankly,
there's no evidence.
It was the Fourth Estate.
And I wish they would just blast this guy.
When Nixon was going down, that helped do that investigation, helped bring down the president when he broke the law. And, you know, you guys want to deny that there's evidence. It's everywhere. And the bank records will prove it out.
All right, we will see. Haven't seen much yet, but
We will see. We haven't seen much yet. It's like, gosh, maybe we should just write a list of the 10 bits of evidence. Maybe we should just explain to them, like they should know, hey, Mr. News Person, there's 2 types of evidence, direct evidence and circumstantial. Which one would you like? You want the direct evidence? Here's a list. You want circumstantial? Here's a list. There you go. And just send it as a memo to them because they don't get it. Even if you did show that to them, they'd say, well, what does that really implicate, Joe? Because they are not interested in the truth. They're interested in the story and the narrative, and they've gotten their talking points. And so like broken records, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. But we'll be here to rebut that, of course.